Super groovy episode for you today. First, we're going to hear from a former manager at a facility that was doing rogue experiments. Then we hear from a commercial fisherman who experienced something very out of the ordinary. Then finally, we end up in Arizona and we'll find out exactly what happened at the crash site. But before we get into the stories, I hope you're all having a wonderful day. Now let's get to the stories. Hi, Donovan. Love your show and what you're doing with getting the word out there. I know there are a lot of naysayers out there who don't believe in the paranormal, or who think these creatures don't exist, or events don't take place. But I'm here to tell you, they absolutely do without a doubt. Listening to all the stories that are sent in makes me feel better about what I experienced. I can't go into great details on where I worked or who I work for, but this happened in the late 90s. I held an office job for a scientific company. There were 6 of us who worked in the safety processing department. We would process paperwork and approvals for chemicals and materials that were involved in various experiments. The company had several large government contracts, which was a major part of the business. It was in a very secure location. We all had badges and the entire facility had tall barbed wire fencing with gates manned by security guards that you had to pass through upon entering. It was a hassle to go out for lunch, so most of us would just eat in our little lunchroom. I worked with 5 other people, 3 women and 2 men. We all had similar responsibilities, but I was the manager of that department. Even as the manager, they never gave too much information away on what was going on there. We were fairly close to the testing facility. Outside of our office was this long corridor, and at the end was the entrance to the testing facility. None of us were ever authorized to go in there. It's manned by guards 24/7, even if there's no testing going on. Now, some of us would go out to happy hour after work, but the guards never came, even after multiple invites. They never associated with us at all. Looking back, they were most likely instructed not to interact with any of the regular employees. The only people who had access to that area were high-level executives, scientists, and the like. So one day while we're working, I hear the breach siren go off. This was the first time that I heard this other than a precautionary drill. Now, we ran these drills every 6 months. They were always scheduled and people knew about them weeks in advance. We had to make sure we were complying with safety regulations. And as a department manager, I would have known because I have to keep a head count of everybody in my department. This one was the real thing. If something happens in that testing facility and a chemical or a gas is leaked, the siren goes off. Really, any breach of the testing facility that is not planned, the breach sirens go off. As soon as we hear the sirens, a coworker of mine, I'll call her Jenny, comes running into the door from the corridor side of the office, screaming and completely out of breath. We all huddled around her and asked her what is going on. Now keep in mind the siren is still blaring at this point, so we need to evacuate immediately, but we pause for a second to see what Jenny is so frightened about. She's talking gibberish and is pointing to the corridor. So I look at the security monitor in the corner of our office, which is a live view right outside of our door into the corridor. I see this creature walking down the hallway, and I see both guards lying on the ground. At the time, it was too hard to make out if the guards were dead or not, but I assumed they were. This humanoid creature is walking very oddly, coming down the corridor right towards us. The thing looked demonic, like something straight out of hell. I can't even describe what animal it resembled because this thing didn't have a face. It looked like it just had this huge mouth and that was it. Had these really long fingers and toes. They looked very odd. From the look I got of this thing, it looked like more than 5 fingers. It stood probably 7 feet tall and had these bony legs but broad shoulders, and its arms were abnormally long. I immediately locked the door and told everyone to evacuate right now. I counted 6 of us, including me at the time, and we went to the opposite side from the corridor to our exit point as fast as we could. There were a bunch of employees outside at that moment because the siren went off for the entire building. Everyone was asking what had happened, but my office area was the only one close to the corridor. My boss immediately came over to me and my group and pulled us aside. We met with him and his boss, the director of testing, and they instructed us not to say anything to the other employees. And if we said something, we could be terminated or held liable for leaking company information. That day, we were all told to go home, and the facility was shut down for 3 days. They blamed it on a gas leak out of the testing facility. But I know what really happened. They created something, or were doing tests on something that already existed. I quit a few months after the incident, and a lot of my team eventually quit too. That place was eventually shut down in 2010. Like I said, I can't give all the details, but thanks for reading my story. Hey Donovan, I can't say I'm happy to be writing to you, but I sure do have a story to tell. I want to be clear and let you know that this sounds wild, but it's the truth, and if you don't want to believe me, that's fine, but I've got the scars to prove it. I'm a lobster man by trade. I work in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and earn a pretty decent wage. If you don't mind smelling like the sea, it's not so bad. Last year, my friend and I went in on a new boat together. We were running along as freelancers for a while, but we decided it's about time we become our own bosses and set sail under our own conditions. The first issue with being the captain is finding a crew. Although we have tons of friends in the industry, it's risky to join with the new captain, and there are union benefits in place to prevent movement to a new boat. A few decided to jump ship and come with me, but not enough to run smoothly. So I was the captain without a full crew. For the most part, boats these days can steer themselves, but the boys are needed for maintenance and upkeep on board and for safety. I don't know what compelled me that day to do it, but I went out alone. It was clear skies and smooth sails, so I never thought I'd have a problem. I was about a mile out to sea when I saw the first clouds roll in. They were thick and heavy, and right away I knew I was done for. The rain and wind came on fast, and before I knew it, I was fighting against the elements. It was rough, and I was scared half to death. Little did I know this would be the worst thing to happen to me that day. I was pushed to an inlet. The waves were huge and spilling up onto my deck. I spotted an old harbor, one that had been abandoned some time ago for a newer set of docks, about a half-mile northward. In my mind, an abandoned harbor means empty docks and a clear spot for landing to sit out the storm. I fought against the waves and the wind and steered over and did my best to drop anchor. I figured if I could just wait out the storm, I'd be okay. Through the rain and the fog, though, I saw something approaching. It was walking up on the dock on all fours. At first, I thought it was a wolf or a coyote or something, but those things really aren't spotted out here on the Cape. Then I think to myself, maybe it's a big dog, like a pit bull or something. And man, those guys can be mean, but at least you know what you're dealing with. But then it stood up, like on its 2 feet, up in the air. And it was tall, and I mean really tall. Its face looked like a German shepherd or something, with these gobs of drool coming down its chin. It was staring right at me. Well, all this time that it's just walking up the dock, I'm just staring over at it and can't move. It's like I'm paralyzed or something. And it's only when it's like 10 feet away do I realize it's coming right for me now. It was still pouring and foggy and the waves were huge, but I decided I'd rather face the elements than face this creature. So I started to untie the knots and roll up the anchor. The waves had been pushing me so close to the dock that I actually had to fasten myself right on to keep from hitting it. I needed to lean over the edge to get the boat untied. I tried to do it as quickly as possible, but the rain made the knot slip and tighten, and being near to that thing was making my hand shaky. I just about had the knot loose when I felt this sharp pain in my arm. That dog thing had scratched my arm. I screamed out in pain, but I knew no one would hear me. I pulled my arm away and jumped back. I fell onto the boat, but I had the rope in my hand. The knot had come undone. This thing was perched on the edge of the boat as it started to be set free from the dock. A huge wave splashed over the deck, and the entire boat rocked back and forth. This thing looked around at the waves and then back at me, and then jumped off the boat back onto the dock. I don't want to say I'm lucky because I sailed back to shore to the emergency room and had to get 9 staples in my arm. But I'm lucky that I'm alive. The scar it left takes up half of my forearm. Now, I've never seen this creature again, but I can tell you every time I dock, I'm always paranoid and looking around. I live in Prescott Valley, Arizona. It's a pretty decent part of the country, without all that glitter and splash you see in the city. This was a Sunday afternoon and I was driving along Iron Springs Road, a section out by Granite Mountain Wilderness area. It's a good drive to clear your head. You can see for miles, and sometimes you can spot pronghorn herds in the distance. I was heading back home, so it was late in the afternoon, probably around 5:30 when I saw it. There was this flash in the sky ahead like an explosion, and I could see something falling down fast. My first thought was it was a small plane that had run into trouble. I checked my phone first to call 911, but no signal. I drive a Nissan Pathfinder, so no worries going off-road, and I figured somebody might need help fast. I tried to pinpoint a place where I'd seen it go down, and got ready for a bumpy ride. In about 5 minutes, I came upon the scene of the accident. I couldn't drive all the way up, since the wreckage was up on top of a rocky knoll, but I hopped out of my truck and jogged up there. I couldn't believe my eyes when I cleared the last boulder. There was some kind of weird small craft, unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was angular and pointy, and made of some sort of shimmery silver-green material. I can't tell you what shape it originally had, because the thing was broken in half, all twisted up and smoking. I was just fixated on the weird metal, or whatever it was, trying to figure out what the heck I was seeing. So I'm standing there about 15 feet away from the thing, when something moves. A creature, notice I don't say person, came out from where it must have been standing behind the wreckage. It was small, probably no bigger than 5 feet tall, but it still scared me speechless. It wasn't human. It looked like the iconic alien pictures you see. Thin body, skinny arms, legs, big oval-shaped head, big black bug eyes. It focused on me and I was terrified. Even though I got the feeling it was injured, there were no cuts or anything that I could see. No green blood oozing or anything like that. It was just a feeling I had, I can't explain it. Like I knew it was hurt, and I knew it was sad. I think another one of its kind didn't survive the crash. All at once I kinda knew these things, no explanation. I was too freaked out to even care if it needed help. I just wanted to be away from there as fast as I could. But then something strange happened. It was just fixing me with this look, and suddenly I was stepping towards it, not away. It was like my feet had a mind of their own. I'm ashamed to say, but I remember hearing myself whimpering like a dog. I was so scared and so powerless. It was the most frightening thing that I had ever experienced. I felt like it was somehow dragging me forward, but then all of a sudden I heard this noise, and the dragging forward feeling stopped all at once. I still couldn't move, but at least I wasn't being forced to come closer. It was a loud ringing sound, like the sound waves after you hit a thin piece of metal, but way louder. And the air seemed to be pressing in on my head. It seriously felt like that, like I was getting squished on all sides by the air itself. A bright light came shooting in from the east. I know that because the sun was setting behind me in the west. The light was a bluish color and really bright, and suddenly this thing appeared overhead. A ship, I guess. I mean, it was bigger than a house and I couldn't see the whole thing. It appeared all at once, suddenly just there looming over us. I hunched down, covering my head when a beam shot out of the bottom, shining on the wreckage. I heard this terrible, loud, screeching noise. All at once, I realized I could move, and I ran like hell, feeling like something terrible was coming. I booked it, stumbling over rocks and praying I didn't fall. I just had this awful feeling of foreboding. I knew I had to get away. I got to my Pathfinder and hopped in and took off. I was too scared to do anything but just drive for a minute or two, when I finally looked in the rearview mirror. I could still see that beam of light, as bright as a lightning bolt. I drove straight to the Prescott Police Department, which was about 25 minutes away. Within 5 minutes, I was regretting my decision. They didn't take me seriously, asked if I had been drinking, acting like the whole thing was some joke. After a few minutes of feeling foolish, I went home. I don't know what happened to that crash site. I monitored the news for the next few days and there was nothing. Honestly, I wouldn't even believe this if a friend told it to me, but it actually happened to me. Let me know what you think about these stories in the comments below. And don't forget to check out Donovan Dread True Crime. I try to release there several times a week. And also check out Lilith Dread. She releases almost every single day. Thanks and take care.